Some wild places are tainted by histories of environmental destruction that have stayed with them long after they've largely recovered to their former state. And few, if any, are more well known in the UK than Gruinard Island, off Scotland's northwest coast. This place was once the site of lethal contamination and a dangerous cleanup operation which left no parts of the island untouched. Now, decades later, I'm spending a night out there to see if life has returned to this notorious site.
My name's Feargus, and this is the middle of nowhere. Evening, folks, and a fine evening it is. A bit breezy, but still quite manageable as long as I am in relatively sheltered waters, and that is exactly what I am doing this evening. I am heading out to a little island not far from the coast, but which has a grisly history. I'm going to spend the night there, and hopefully I will be perfectly well when I come back, because for a long time you couldn't go out to this place because you risked getting extremely ill, fatally ill in fact. So I'll explain a bit more about the story when I'm on the island, but first I am going to get there and have a look at the coast along the way, because we've got a fine high spring tide this evening, and that is the best time to go paddling along what is a surprisingly spectacular coast, I'm told, considering the island itself is relatively unremarkable once you get up onto the land. So here we go, let's have a look at the coast. Whoop. I have landed. A minor change of plan. It's pretty windy. There's not a lot of fun paddling. It certainly won't be fun coming back to this beach, which is a good spot for landing and camping. So I've decided to stop here and get up early in the morning to go for the paddle when the high tide comes at 8 a.m. So now I'm going to have a look around the island as well as looking for a campsite. Ooh. Well, this is at least a little bit out of the wind. It's really intense. The forecast is for it to calm down a lot overnight and be fairly calm for the first half of tomorrow, but we'll see. This is really eerie, I have to say. In 1942, ordered by Winston Churchill, this place was the site of a biological warfare test. The island was purchased from the people who owned it. All access was cut off except for the Ministry of Defence. 80 sheep were taken here and tethered close to some very special bombs. Once all of the military personnel had left the island, the bombs were detonated, releasing millions of anthrax spores into the air and blown straight over to the sheep. Within a few days, the sheep became ill, and soon after that, they were all dead. There wasn't an awful lot of thought given to what would happen after the spores had been released on the island. And in the end, the MOD burned the sheep carcasses, which had been infected, and obviously the personnel that came out to do that job were wearing protective suits. But there were spores all over the place in the soil, and the efforts that were made shortly after the war to decontaminate the island and sell the island back to the original owners failed to get rid of the anthrax spores. And in fact, they were very, very durable and persisted in the soil for decades, as tests which periodically came out to have a look at it showed. So the island was completely off limits to anybody except for people who had been hired by the MOD in order to carry out experiments to see how it is, because it was a death trap, basically. And the plan, of course, was that if the tests were successful, that anthrax bombs would be dropped on Germany in populated areas. So, not a very nice way to go. That, of course, never happened. But the problem of the contaminated island was still a problem. And it was just left off limits for decades, until in the 80s, a group of anonymous people claiming to be university researchers under the title of Operation Dark Harvest started making demands that the government clean the place up, actually do a proper job, because they had neglected to do so ever since the 1940s. And the communications that they had with the government anonymously indicated that if they didn't do something, that they would start leaving packages containing contaminated soil from the island at specific locations, which were not disclosed at the time. Sure enough, within days of that, packages started arriving at military research facilities. And when they were tested, they were shown to be positively containing anthrax spores. So almost certainly came from the island. That began to galvanize the government into actually doing something about it. I have to say, it's a little bit disconcerting talking about all of this and walking through this dry and dusty soil, which gets up in the wind in a puff of dust and blows off in that direction. Now at this point, you might be wondering, what is that idiot doing wandering around on an island which is contaminated with a lethal infection in the soil? But let me finish the story. So starting in the mid-80s and lasting for a couple of years, the authorities began to decontaminate the island. The effort involved nearly 300 tons of formaldehyde, which was sprayed all over every fraction of the island. Every square centimetre was absolutely blitzed with this deadly poison. And the area around where the test actually took place, the topsoil was completely removed from the island and taken away. So shortly after that, a flock of sheep were repositioned on the island and left there to see if anything happened. and all of them remained healthy. By 1990, after several years of cautious optimism, it was declared that the island was completely free of anthrax. And the warning signs, which were all around the coast telling people to stay away, were removed, and the island was sold back to its original owner. And since that time, people have regularly come out. Kayakers like me come out and pay a visit. People have camped on the island. Nobody, and no animals as far as anybody is aware, have become ill. But it's still a bit disconcerting being out here with that history in my head. It is quite a bleak and open landscape, at least up here on the higher parts of the island. And now I am just at the highest point on all of Gruinard Island, Anthrax Island. Way! Someone has built a cairn. I wonder if they went home and keeled over after that. All of 106 meters above sea level. It is really windy. There's some birdies, and it actually does look quite pleasant on the northern end of the island. Probably not very easy to land though. There goes the ferry out to Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis. Very airy. I can see where I was in the previous video. Over there, the Summer Isles. I'd highly recommend it, it's very good. Now, aside from the bleak history of this place, it's very much alive, and it looks like things are improving. The soil here might be quite lumpy, but this is one of a number of beautiful little groves of willow trees dotted around on this side of the island. And it's not that often that I actually see willows in these kind of numbers. And there are saplings of trees coming up all over the place, because unlike in many areas, there's nothing here to eat them. So if left to their own devices, the island could become quite heavily forested, and that would be quite something. Right. Sun's gonna set soon, and I still haven't decided where I'm gonna pitch my tent. It's getting late. The wind has dropped off, just as was prophesized. So it is really very calm. And I just decided to set my tent up right on the stones. It was the flattest space available. And I haven't even bothered with the outer sheet, because according to the forecast, there is basically zero chance of any rain. So why not? It's much more open and free feeling. So it's really nice. And I am just watching the birds come and go on the rocks over there.
as the dusk comes. Of course, because of the time of year, it's quite late. It's about 10:30, and I've set my alarm for 6 a.m. so I can be up to go paddling when the tide is good. Down on the beach here, it doesn't feel particularly eerie. It just feels like a beautiful dusk coastal moment with the wildlife and the sounds of the water gently lapping up against the rocks. Anyway, good night. Well, as I'm now building up the willpower to get out into the midge-fest and pack my boat as quickly as possible, because they won't be hanging around me once I get on the water, I thought I would do my marketing spiel. So thank you all for watching this video on this beautiful morning. If this is the first video of mine that you've watched, have a think about going back and looking at some of my earlier videos. There's quite a lot on there. Not just sea kayaking or island bagging, although I will put the playlist to those specific videos in the description where you can easily find it if you scroll down to the description below the video. There are lots and lots of other videos all exploring the wilderness in various parts of Scotland and a few from the wider world. I am absolutely passionate about making these videos, but your watching is what makes it all worthwhile. So if you're not already a subscriber, hit the subscribe button below the video, and if you know anybody who might be interested in this kind of stuff, then maybe hit the share button as well and share a link to the video, the playlist, or the channel in general with like-minded individuals who might also be interested in this kind of stuff. I am really hoping to be able to keep doing this in perpetuity, and being able to make this whole thing financially self-sustaining is going to make that much more likely. So if you're a regular viewer and you can afford a couple of quid every month, have a think about paying me for the videos that I make. There's a link to Patreon in the description, and just the price of a cup of coffee or so once a month would really help to make this whole thing more likely to be sustainable into the future. Unlike a lot of people, I don't do exclusive content for patrons, but any donation would be very much appreciated. Now, I'm gonna think about getting out. God, the midges are getting worse all the time. Oh, midge nightmare. Slow it down. Amazing. Ooh. Oh. Food on my boat. Beautiful. Absolutely amazing.
sleeping seal. Hasn't even noticed me. Just floating with its nose up. Looks quite content. So now that I have a bit more sunlight around this part of the island, this is where I'm gonna actually jump into the water and see how the life is doing underneath the surface. Out of the cold water. So, has Gruinard Island come back from the dead? Well, as far as I can tell, I can't see any sign of it being significantly different to anywhere else on the islands around here, or the coastline for that matter. In the water, there's plenty of kelp. There's none of the really big kelp that I've seen around other areas. That might have absolutely nothing to do with what happened here, 40 years ago, almost. The rocks are covered in beautiful anemones. Not an awful lot of fish around, but often when I snorkel around here, there are times when I don't see a lot of fish. In some areas, there are loads of them, and in other areas, it's quite sparse. Hey, oyster catcher. But there are loads of young jellyfish, so the lion's manes are growing fast. At this time of year, they are relatively small, but in a month or two, they're going to be big with long tentacles. And above ground, the grass looks fine. There's some beautiful thrift growing on all the rocks here, which are covered in the same kind of lichen that you see on other islands, just like on Carnlar, where I was in the previous video. So who would have thought that an island surrounded by so much life and so much beauty could have been subjected to such a massive amount of biological torture? Anyhow, the strong winds have not returned yet, so I'm going to get myself back on the water and head home. Hopefully be back on the mainland shore by lunchtime before the wind picks up. It's been a stunning morning and a stunning night. Like, subscribe, share. Thanks very much. I'll see you soon.